campaign of Hillary Rodham Clinton.
It's either that he's really good at foreign policy, which I doubt, or he knows something, or they owe him, and I think that's what it is.
Do I think he should be advising Hillary Clinton? I think he's a perfect candidate to advise Hillary Clinton. He's sleazy, he broke the law, he will do her bidding. He should be her chief of staff, as a matter of fact.
Hillary is tough on terror as long as it's popular. But once again, the real Hillary Clinton remains a mystery.
We went through all the speeches that were posted on her website, some 200 of them, and there's no speech that's about counterterrorism or talks about the threat to the homeland.
Whatever Mrs. Clinton took away from the 9/11 experience is now slipping away. Or perhaps she never meant it in the first place. But as far as I know, Senator Clinton simply has not wanted to discuss with clarity and certainly with the kind of authority you would expect from a now senior member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, that we are at war with a totalitarian ideology.
I'd like to see a president in either party who is going to be honest about the nature of the danger and willing to stand up and say this is what needs to be done, even if it's not popular at the moment. She doesn't seem to have any instinct to be able to do that, whatever her high intelligence might be.
Who is the real Hillary Clinton? Clinton scholars and writers hoping for an answer were shocked to learn that, despite Freedom of Information Act stipulations, after 3 years, the Clinton Library has only released 0.5% of its records.
This is the mentality of a tyranny, and yet the media treats this as if it's no big deal. It is a very, very big deal. We paid for those documents at that library. Much of our money goes into that library. It's a federally run operation.
The Clinton Library is known locally as Little Rock's Fort Knox. Nearly 2 million pages of records covering Hillary's years in the White House are locked away, clouding her role in policymaking. Over 300 Freedom of Information Act requests are pending.
Well, that's not my decision to make, and I don't believe that any president or first lady ever has, but certainly we'll move as quickly as our circumstances and the processes of the National Archives permits.
This idea they're claiming now that we're trying to release them, we're trying to as fast as we can, but the library just won't let us release them. You want the papers released, order the papers released. They're your papers.
A tendency of this administration, from the top all the way to the bottom, is to withhold information, to resist legitimate requests for information, to refuse to be forthcoming about information that is of significance and relevant to the job that all of you do and the interests of the American people.
I think the American people have a right to as much of the public record as possible about Hillary Clinton. Those records should be released before the 2008 election so we can learn a lot more about exactly how much influence she had in the White House, what her positions were in the White House, and how she acted in the White House.
Character is defined as what we do when we think no one is looking. By that standard, many critics say the Clintons are sorely lacking. On January 20th, 2001, President Clinton issued 140 pardons on his last day in office. Those pardoned or receiving commuted sentences included cocaine trafficker Carlos Vignali and the biggest tax fugitive in U.S. history, Mark Rich. As much as those pardons reveal about Bill, an earlier pardon may have revealed even more about Hillary's character and her willingness to do anything to get elected.
I remember the first Met game my dad took me to, and we were sitting at the very top of Shea Stadium. It was probably 1971. It was just a beautiful day out with my dad. You know, he loved the Mets. He loved his sports. That's one thing that I'll never forget, is sort of being in the car with him and being at the game with him, just enjoying his presence. It was an idyllic childhood, to be honest with you. I couldn't have asked for a better childhood up until I was 9. My dad was a very decent, honest family man. As a matter of fact, on that day, January 24th, he was looking forward to coming home that Friday, celebrating my brother's 11th and my 9th birthdays. It was going to be a big family event for us. Francis Tavern has an extraordinary place in American history. It's where the Sons of Liberty met. It's where George Washington bid farewell to his officers at the end of the Revolutionary War. And it's also the place where Frank Connor, my father, was murdered in 1975.
On January 24th, 1975, I was working as surveillance on the west side of Manhattan, and the sirens started to go off. Just an endless stream of fire trucks, police vehicles going down to the southern end of Manhattan. A short time later, turning on a radio, easy to find out that there had been a bombing at Francis Tavern. Nobody dreamt that this was a daytime bombing of a restaurant in New York City in the United States of America, because it simply was not the sort of thing that happened in America.
The senseless bombing had been perpetrated by what was arguably the most active terrorist organization in U.S. history, the FALN. But in 1975, the FALN was a newly formed, previously unheard-of organization that through deadly violence advocated complete independence for Puerto Rico.
I kept hoping and thinking that maybe he's under rubble, trying to get through and there's a mistake. It really didn't happen, that he was okay. My mom says now that all she wanted to do was run. She wanted to run out the door and keep running. I remember I was a little tiny 9-year-old, and I was one of the guys that picked me up, and I was sort of punching him in the back, not knowing how to react to something like that.
Joe, this is the Bissell dining room at Francis Tavern, and this is the room that suffered most of the damage in the bombing on January 24th, 1975. The bomb was placed actually just on the opposite side of these doors. Waiters and some of the other witnesses remember seeing somebody come through this door carrying a large duffel bag. He looked around the room. One of the waiters was about to approach him and tell him that he had to leave when he stepped back out. Apparently left the bomb outside. This was a typical FALN device. It was a quantity of dynamite. It included propane tanks, which was one of their trademarks in building their bombs in the early days, and a simple timer, a wristwatch altered to serve as a timer to set off the device.
So he knew when he placed it that essentially the people that he had seen were going to feel the impact of it.
Absolutely. He knew that he was committing mass murder, no question about it.
Where would my dad have been sitting in relation to this table?
I believe your dad was sitting at the end of the table here, Joe, and would have been one of the first people hit by the blast of the bomb. Joe, the bomb being just outside this door here, when it functioned, much of the blast came, of course, through into this room, knocking down this door, and that shock wave would have taken everything in the room and just made missiles out of it. So you have victims that have pieces of glassware, pieces of silverware pushed into their bodies as a result of the blast.
Do we know why they chose the time, the place, the day?
The communique that they left said that they were trying to kill capitalist, imperialist pigs in Francis Tavern, and specifically cites Francis as being the target. 4
died, and more than 50 were injured. It was a typical FALN operation, one of over 130 bombings between 1974 and 1983. But on that crisp winter day at Francis Tavern, no one could imagine what the future held for the murderous members of the FALN.
Hillary's biggest problem running for the Senate was that she wasn't a New Yorker. And how was she going to appeal to the specific ethnic groups that make up the New York State electorate? So, in September 1999, right in the middle of her Senate campaign, she was approached by City Councilman Jose Rivera, who really is a spokesman for the Hispanic community in New York, who gave her a packet urging the pardoning of the FALN terrorists. And included in the packet was a letter to Hillary asking her to use her influence on her husband